he simply cannot stop, or maybe it's just a strategy. Donald Trump will not relent in how he breaks a gag order imposed on him by the judge overseeing his Manhattan hush money trial just last night, as the judge weighs whether or how to punish the former president for 10 instances. The prosecution claims he flaunted restrictions on what he can say. Trump seems to have just ignored the rules again. Here's what he said about a witness, Michael Cohen, in an interview with CNN affiliate WPVI.
Michael Cohen is a convicted liar, and he's got no credibility whatsoever. He was a lawyer, and you rely on your lawyers.
Joining me now, CNN legal analyst Carrie Cardero and CNN correspondent Kara Scannell, who has been CNN's eyes and ears and then some inside the courtroom covering this trial. Kara, I do want to start with you on this gag order. What is the expectation? What are you hearing from your sources in the court? Any sense of, I mean, we don't know how it's going to come down, but even the when?
Well, we're waiting for the judge to issue this decision. Yesterday, after the hearing, he said he would reserve decision on this, but it came after what was at times contentious hearing, with the judge becoming frustrated with Donald Trump's legal team not responding to his questions, as he put it, because prosecutors have said that Trump has violated this gag order at least 10 times. They have the interview that you just played a clip of, Trump actually gave yesterday morning on his way to court before this hearing took place, but it echoes some of the other statements that prosecutors have said are problematic. So the judge was pressing Trump's attorneys in court about what was he responding to? Because their argument has been that Trump is a candidate. He should be able to respond to political attacks. They were saying statements from Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels were political, and the judge just kept pressing, saying, what was political about this? What is he responding to here? Mm-hmm. And at one point, one of the other arguments that they made is that Trump's lawyers said that he was just reposting what other people were posting. But the judge was challenging that too. And at one point, he grew frustrated, saying, Trump's lawyers trying to argue again, but Your Honor. And then the judge saying, I was not done. You're not giving me anything to hang my hat on to say, yeah, you're right, the repost, that was ambiguous. So judge just becoming frustrated and saying that Trump's attorney was losing credibility because he was not able to answer the judge's questions.
And Carrie, the court is not in session today on this particular case. But we are now in the middle of the David Pecker testimony. We heard it most of the day, not all day yesterday. We expect it to resume tomorrow. The court is releasing the actual transcripts. And part of what I want to read from the testimony that they released last night is David Pecker talking about Trump's involvement specifically. And he said, I would describe Mr. Trump as very knowledgeable. I would describe him as very detail-oriented. I would describe him almost as a micromanager from what I saw, that he looked at all aspects of whatever the issue was. From a lawyer's perspective, why is that such important testimony?
Well, it's important because one of the main things that the prosecutors have to prove in this case is that the former president was knowledgeable about the fraud that is alleged to have taken place. And so this general characterization of the former president as being a micromanager, being involved in the details of things, sort of goes along that path of him having knowledge of the fraud that the prosecutors say takes place. But the other aspect of Mr. Pecker's testimony is that it is not illegal to do sleazy things to influence an election in the way of trying to win it. And I think the big challenge for the prosecutors in this case is distinguishing between the fraud and the actual way to affect the election in an illegal way that is different than just sort of unsavory conduct.
Yeah, the prosecution is clearly with Pecker trying to lay the groundwork of Donald Trump being somebody who would never allow for alleged fraudulent documents to go forward without him knowing about it. And
right.
So that's clearly part of this.
CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson joins us now. Joey, how do you anticipate Judge Merchan is going to rule on whether Trump violated this gag order?
Yeah, Boris, good to be with you. And Brianna, the way that I see it is that these are violations. And so the question to me is not whether or not any of the several posts, 10 and counting, of course, with the one we just showed, yes, that was said before and aired after. There's no question to me that they were violations. The critical inquiry is what specifically the judge is going to do. The trial is just underway, and we're at the stage where the judge, Boris, has to set the tone and tenor for the proceeding. And just make no mistake about it, it's not only about the tone and tenor of the proceeding. It's not only about the integrity of our process. It's not only about following rules, right? But the issue is whether or not someone could be harmed. Yes, there's witness intimidation, but there's also people who have pretty strongly held views and are on various sides as we look there at what the judge can do in terms of imposing $1,000 or giving Mr. Trump incarceration. But the reality is something's got to give. And so what I think the judge is struggling with is what is the appropriate remedy at this point to stop this from happening. If it's happening now, you better believe it's going to be likely that it continues to happen. The judge has to stop it in its tracks.
Yeah, let's put back up that graphic where it said the possible penalties for contempt here, because you can see it says $1,000 or up to 30 days. I think we all know which one would be more convincing to former President Trump when it comes to getting him to stay within the lines here. And to that point, Joey, CNN's John Miller has reported that the Secret Service, court officers, and NYC Corrections have been quietly discussing what happens if Trump ends up being jailed for contempt. If he continues to violate the gag order, do you see any scenario where that would actually happen?
I really do. And I do because let's talk about a few things. Number one, if we accept the proposition that no one is above the law, the options we looked at just there, right? There's the admonishment, but we also looked at the monetary $1,000 punishment. Guess what? Wasn't there just a civil proceeding wherein there's a $500 million judgment or so against the former president? Has that prevented him from doing anything? Hasn't there been an E. Jean Carroll defamation case? Two, right? I mean, one relating to allegations of sexual assault, wherein there's up to $90 million. What has that done? And so it gets us, Brianna, to your question of the other option, which is jail. Now, potentially, you have a maximum of 30 days under the law. Does that mean he puts him in? That is the judge at some point for a few hours. Does he put him in overnight? But it has to be a real possibility. And obviously, the Secret Service and interested parties have to do it in a way where they're ready for such a contingency. Now, there may be other ramifications to that, I think, that have to weigh on the judge, not only of this proceeding, but, how might there be a public reaction, right? We can say that, hey, the judge shouldn't be considering that, but, I just think people are so entrenched in their views that the judge has to consider everything in terms of safety and incarceration, though, to get the former president, to do what he's supposed to do and what everyone else really kind of does all the time, which is to follow judicial orders, and if not, they're in contempt, I think has to be on the table.
Joey, I want to present a contrasting view of things. We spoke to someone you frequently share our air with, Michael Moore, a criminal defense attorney in Georgia, yesterday, and he argued that he believes Trump is doing this deliberately to take the focus off the actual content of the case and to make the focus about his rhetoric and his ongoing fights with Michael Cohen, et cetera. I'm curious what you think of that, if you think this is a deliberate attempt from Trump to distract, and if so, whether that might influence the judge to handle it differently.
Yeah, I think Michael Moore may be onto something, and that may be very well the case. Now, it's very difficult, Boris, Brianna, for us to know. We're not competent to know what someone else is thinking. We can only discern what they're thinking based on inferences, but whether it's politics, whether it's to take the steam off of it, that's the reality. There's an order. You need to follow it. There are consequences. If you don't, what that consequence is, we're going to find out when the judge issues the decision.
Joey Jackson, always great to get your perspective. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Boris.